Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Inner Spark, the place where stories remind us of the strength we all carry within. This is the story of Ruben, a young man who finds himself battling fear when life takes an unexpected turn. Through courage, trust, and hope, he learns that fear only holds power when we allow it. In the end, hope lights the path that fear once tried to block. Before we begin, if you enjoy stories that inspire and motivate, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Inner Spark. Ruben had always been a dreamer, a boy from Bristol who loved sketching designs and dreaming of becoming an architect. His parents encouraged him, though life wasn't always easy for them. The family lived in a small house, and every penny was carefully saved. Still, Ruben's determination was clear, and he believed the future would hold something brighter. But deep down, there was also a shadow, an unspoken fear that failure might arrive before success ever did. He tried to ignore it, but fear has a way of whispering louder when you start to rise. One morning, Ruben received a letter that his application to a prestigious university in London had been rejected. It felt like his chest caved in, as if all those late nights and efforts had dissolved into nothing. He stared at the letter, reading the words over and over until the ink blurred with his tears. Fear immediately filled the silence. What if he wasn't good enough? What if this was the end of his dream? The rejection cut deeper than he expected, leaving him stuck between despair and doubt. That evening, his best friend Chester came over. He had always been Ruben's voice of reason, the one who saw light when Ruben only saw gray. He found him sitting in his room, staring blankly at a sketchbook. He placed his hand on his shoulder and said softly, "Ruben, rejection doesn't define you. It redirects you." But Ruben couldn't hear the hope in his words. He only heard the echo of failure. Fear had begun to take root, and hope seemed to be fading fast. Days turned into weeks, and Ruben withdrew more and more. He avoided calls, skipped opportunities to showcase his designs, and even stopped sketching. Fear was now his daily companion, whispering that he would never make it. He told himself that maybe architecture was never meant for him. Chester tried to reach him, but sometimes when fear grips too tightly, even love and encouragement struggle to break through. It was as if his light had dimmed, leaving him lost in his own darkness. One evening, Ruben's father found him sitting in the garden, staring at the empty sky. His father, a quiet man who rarely spoke about emotions, sat beside him. After a long pause, he said, "When I lost my job years ago, I thought it was the end. But sometimes, endings are disguised beginnings. Fear told me I was finished, but hope told me to stand again. If I had given in, we wouldn't be here." Those words, though simple, sparked something inside Ruben. The next morning, Ruben opened his sketchbook for the first time in months. The pages smelled of dust. The pencil felt foreign in his hand, but slowly his fingers remembered the rhythm of lines and curves. It wasn't easy. Fear still hovered, telling him it was pointless. But hope, though faint, had returned like a flicker of light. He sketched small designs, not for universities, not for anyone's approval, but for himself. It was the beginning of choosing hope, even if fear tried to stand in the way. Chester saw him drawing again and smiled. He decided to push him gently towards new opportunities. He told him about a local competition in Manchester for young designers. At first, Ruben laughed bitterly, saying he wasn't ready. Fear spoke louder than his courage. But Chester reminded him, hope grows when you water it. Don't starve it by listening to fear. His words echoed in Ruben's heart. That night, Ruben stayed awake, battling the voices in his head until finally he signed up. The competition wasn't smooth. Ruben felt nervous, his hands trembling as he presented his model. Other participants seemed more confident, more polished, and fear tried to convince him to walk away. But as he stood before the judges, he remembered his father's words and Chester's encouragement. He chose to speak, his voice shaky but steadying with every word. In that moment, he realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing hope despite it. Ruben didn't win first place, but he won something greater, confidence. The judges praised his creativity, and one of them, an architect from London, approached him afterwards. She told him that rejection was part of the journey, but his talent had potential. She offered to mentor him if he was willing to work hard. Ruben felt a surge of gratitude and disbelief. Hope had brought him to this very moment. With new mentorship, Ruben began working harder than ever. The days were long, sometimes exhausting, but different this time. He wasn't being driven by fear of failure, but by hope for the future. Every sketch carried his heart. Every mistake became a lesson. Slowly, his designs gained recognition, and he began believing again in the boy who once dreamed fearlessly. As months passed, Ruben's projects were displayed in exhibitions. People admired his creativity, and opportunities started knocking. He found himself in rooms he once thought he'd never enter. Fear still whispered occasionally, but hope had grown louder. He had discovered that fear never truly disappears. It only loses its power when hope is chosen again and again. One day, Ruben received a letter. This time not a rejection, but an invitation to join a collaborative project in London. He sat in silence, holding the letter, remembering the night he cried over rejection. This moment felt different, not because he had finally made it, but because he had grown strong enough to choose hope over fear. His journey wasn't perfect, but it was proof that fear doesn't get the final say. He called Chester, his voice filled with joy, and told him the news. Chester laughed, proud and emotional, reminding him of the boy who once doubted himself. See, Ruben, fear may shout, but hope whispers stronger when you listen closely. They both knew this was just the beginning of a brighter path. Ruben finally understood that the real victory wasn't in achievements. It was in the courage to keep going. Ruben's story became an inspiration not only to his friends, but also to young dreamers in his town. He began visiting schools, telling students about his journey, reminding them that rejection is not the end. He shared how fear nearly trapped him, but hope helped him rise again. The students listened wide-eyed, many of them silently carrying their own fears. Ruben's words gave them something to hold on to, a reminder that they, too, could choose hope. His father often smiled quietly, watching his son grow into a man of resilience. He saw in Ruben the very strength he had once needed himself. Chester, too, felt proud, knowing his friend had finally embraced the light he always saw in him. Life still had challenges ahead, but Ruben now faced them differently. Fear no longer paralyzed him. It pushed him to dig deeper into hope. There came a moment when Ruben stood on a stage in London, addressing a crowd of young designers. His voice was steady, filled with conviction. He shared his story of rejection, despair, and renewal. Fear will always try to control you, he said, but every time you choose hope, you take back the power. The crowd applauded, but Ruben wasn't looking for applause. He was sharing the lesson that saved him. Ruben's life wasn't without difficulties. There were still setbacks, late nights, and doubts. But now, every time fear returned, he had learned to recognize it as part of the process. Hope became his compass, guiding him even through uncertainty. The boy who once cried over rejection had grown into a man who stood firm in the face of challenges. Hope had truly lit his heart. His journey taught him that hope wasn't just a feeling, it was a decision, one he had to make daily. He realized that no success or recognition could replace the simple, powerful choice of not giving in to fear. Life was unpredictable, but his response was within his control. And in choosing hope, Ruben found peace, strength, and purpose. Ruben never forgot where he came from, and he carried his story like a lantern for others walking in darkness. He understood now that every rejection, every setback, had shaped him into the person he became. Hope wasn't just for him. It was a gift to share, a light for others. And as he continued his journey, he promised himself to never let fear dim his spark again. Conclusion. Ruben's story reminds us that fear will always exist, but it doesn't have to define us. Every rejection, every doubt, every setback can either hold us down or push us forward. The choice is ours. When we choose hope over fear, we find the strength to rise, the courage to keep going, and a light to guide others along the way.